most restaurants go bankrupt because they throw away too much food. Their inventory is too big and they lose too much of it. It got people talking about them probably, so that's clever. I think you can't generalize fully, but I think mostly younger generations, Gen Y, Gen Z, are quite environmentally conscious. The preparation waste, there will always be some of it, but there are things you can do to tackle that. One is there are techniques to cut vegetables in a way that they can be stored longer, but there are also cutting techniques for meat and fish, which allow you to use more meat and fish, so you throw less of it away. And that's all things you can teach. Well, there's simply the forecasting, which is something you have to get a feeling for. I guess you can also use software, but I don't know how viable it is for small restaurants. And I think most restaurants are small. That's something that people forget. So McDonald's can do software forecasting, but your average restaurant can't do it. Yeah, that's also a thing. People are afraid of running out of dishes, but I don't think they should be. Because if you run out of stuff, okay, it can sometimes hurt you and it shouldn't be every dish every day by 1 p.m. But a certain scarcity is also can be helpful as a marketing technique, basically. Authenticity has become a very big buzzword in hospitality, especially in restaurants. Sometimes people are being overly harsh on McDonald's and so on, because they're very big companies, and like a air freight carrier, it takes a while to turn. But I think if they do it, then it has a huge impact. So yeah. I think, yeah, they deserve support whenever they do something that is good. Yeah. And but also small restaurants, which together are also a huge part of the industry, should do more. They sometimes try to push it off onto the bigger ones. On a big scale, there's always something, but I think it needs to become more structural across the whole economy. Because at the end of the day, all those examples, they are nice, but they are outliers. I remember when I grew up in a hotel in Switzerland, we still had a big blue barrel where we put in food waste and the farmer would pick it up. And especially in Japan and South Korea, if they figured out a way to do it safely, I think Europe shouldn't be so hesitant to learn. I think business schools need to do a lot more in terms of teaching about sustainability. So not only will we get back to old levels of the staff shortage, I think it will be worse, because a lot of people that were in the industry have left it by now, either because they had to, because they didn't have a job, or because they decided the industry is not as stable as we thought. Maybe we should transition to something more stable, like healthcare. I hear a lot of people talk about reusable packaging. I'm not really a believer in that, because restaurants really have a lot of liability when it comes to people getting sick and so on. So I believe more in sustainable packaging that can be sustainably broken down rather than reusable packaging, personally. They mostly think it's fine everywhere, except for where you are physically, where the robot or the software would have physical control over you. So wellness, it was very unpopular. There is a line where the human interaction becomes more important than the speed or the hygiene.
Welcome to Meirer Talks Trash. What are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about sustainability.
Okay, and who are you?
I'm Marius, Zürcher.
Yeah, Zürcher, is there a connection to Zurich, to Switzerland? I see a lot of winter paintings in your background.
Yeah, that is my Swiss wall, as I call it. I am Swiss, but the name Zürcher is not related to Zurich.
Okay.
Actually, two Zürcher families, I think, originally. And one of them is from Zurich, but I'm not one of those.
Okay. And Marius, what is your background? What do you do?
Well, I have a hospitality background, but now I run my own millennial and Gen Z marketing consulting firm. which goes beyond just hospitality.
Okay, what do you mean with hospitality background? Did you work in hotels, in restaurants?
Yeah, I'm from a hotel and restaurant family. So really, since I was a little kid, I grew up in hotels and restaurants, and later I also worked there.
And in which
years ago?
Pardon?
Until 2 years ago.
Okay, and in which countries did you gain your experience?
In Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands.
When you said in the hospitality business, I also know the term HoReCa, and I always thought, coming from the recycling industry and just working in the HoReCa business for about 2 years, and I always thought that HoReCa stands for hotel, restaurants, and catering, because we have a lot of catering customers. Yeah. But recently I found out that the CA is for cafe.
Yeah.
And I also found out that it has a connection to the Netherlands. So you're living in the Netherlands. Yeah. Can you please explain why the connection to the Netherlands is?
I think the Dutch basically came up with that term. Here it's just the term we use for hospitality. And yeah, HoReCa is hotels, restaurants, and cafes. But in the Netherlands, a cafe is not a place where you get coffee, but a bar.
You also studied hospitality, an MBA about hospitality management. Is that correct?
Yeah, my bachelor's degree was more general, international business administration, in economics and management. And then my MBA was hospitality and services management.
Okay. Yeah. What can you remember from that MBA? What do you learn in an MBA for hospitality management? What is the most important? What did you like most? What helped you a lot the most for your day-to-day business?
Well, I think that's hard to say. It really depends on the teachers you have, I think. I had a couple of very good teachers, and they mostly taught me stuff that I didn't know from my own experience. So they really taught us the details of how the big hotel chains, how they actually work. That's something I didn't know. But overall, an MBA, that's recommended you do if you studied business before, but it's also a lot of repetition if you studied business before. So
yeah. And you're running a company called 1520. What are you doing with 1520?
Well, we help companies to attract millennials and Gen Z customers and employees, basically. So it's marketing and also employer branding.
Okay. In the hospitality industry or not exclusively?
No, it's not exclusively hospitality, though we have had a lot of hospitality customers. Because of my background, we just knew them, basically. So that's how it started.
No. And we means you and your girlfriend, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And does your girlfriend also have a background in the hospitality industry, or?
Well, she didn't as a child, but then we met actually when we were 17 and 16. And since then, she was also involved basically in the family businesses.
Okay. And who is responsible for which tasks in the company?
In terms of the consulting, we both do everything. But then as far as the rest goes, she's more responsible for the bookkeeping, and I do more of the content and the social media and stuff like that.
Yeah. Why is your company called 1520? What is the origin? What is the reason why?
Well, as I said, we now do millennials and Gen Z, but when we started, it was only millennials, because we're also millennials and they were very relevant at the time. And we picked 1520 because there is a particular book. It's called The Tanning of America by a writer called Steve Stout. And it's about how hip hop has affected business worldwide. And in it, he calls millennials the hip hop generation because they grew up parallel, basically. and they were influenced by it, whether they know it or not. So, and we also grew up as hip hop fans. So we were looking for a name and we couldn't find one. And then it clicked basically. And I said, how about 1520? Because 1520 Sedgwick Avenue, which is an address in New York, is where the story goes, hip hop was born.
Okay.
So we wanted a name that's a reference, but also not too obvious.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Very, very authentic. Yeah. And this brings us then to the next topic I want to talk about in a minute. But maybe could you explain a little bit more in detail, who is your customer? Who are you working together with 1520? Is it the business directly, or the companies, or with consultants?
Our customers until now mostly were other consultants. I don't really know how that happened, but it just happened that way. And they were usually older consultants that wanted us to look at their work that they're doing for customers and maybe freshen it up a little for younger consumers. So that's what we did a lot. And then lately, we've also been doing startup consulting for young companies. A lot of the times, people we met when we went back to school. Yeah.
So they want to know if they are already out of touch or if they really still understand the next generation.
Yeah, that's part of it, but also we could just help them with everything basically, not just with the millennials and Gen Z part.
Yeah, and well, I found you because you're writing for the FCSI, Food Service Consultants Society International. You write a monthly article, monthly blog for them.
Yeah.
How did that come?
Well, I was once invited to a panel about millennials, I think, if I remember it right. And there I met the editor of the Food Service Consultant magazine. And then a few years later, I wrote a paper for school, which I was a big fan of. So I asked him if maybe they wanted to publish it. And that didn't work out because it's too academic. But he did ask me to write a monthly column for them, because apparently he did like the writing.
Let's talk about that essay. I already mentioned the term authenticity. You wrote about an essay on authenticity in restaurants.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's a very complex subject. Could be a whole episode, I think, basically. But it's really about that authenticity has become a very big buzzword in hospitality, especially in restaurants. And the restaurants it has the biggest effect on is ethnic restaurants. And I wanted to write about what that effect is. So how does it affect them positively, but also negatively? And what does the term actually mean? Because like many buzzwords, people use it a lot, but they don't know what it really means.
You mentioned ethnic restaurants. You quoted Kay, and he found out, or he quoted reported about a study done with Yelp users, where they found out that for ethnic restaurants, non-European restaurants, non-Western restaurants, like I think Chinese, Indian food, and I don't know, at least Chinese and Indian, Chinese cuisine and Indian cuisine. It's more a little authenticity is also related to dirty floors, he writes, and cheap inventory, maybe stools. But for Western restaurants, Italian restaurant, French restaurant, Spanish restaurant, it's related to quality aspects. Do you agree on that, or?
Yeah, I think that basically the point of the paper is that people came up with their own definition of authenticity. And it appears that a lot of customers, the things they think are authentic in non-Western restaurants are, like you mentioned, often have negative connotations, aside from the food. And in Western restaurants, that's not the case. But that leads to a trap, what they call the authenticity trap. Because then as a Chinese restaurant, for example, you can either make your inventory fancier and stuff like that, but people will perceive you as less authentic. So your Yelp score goes down. But the authenticity can only take you up so far, because then you run into the ceiling of your inventory and your service and so on. So they can never go beyond a certain level because of this authenticity trap. Whereas a lot of Western restaurants do not have that problem.
Yeah, you mentioned a Yelp score. Can you explain Yelp? Because I think it more or less was established in the time about 2005, something like that, where the Gen Y generation earned their first money, yeah, and spent their first money. So it's mostly for Gen Y people, right? But
yeah.
What is it? Can you explain it?
I think the Gen Y, they started to make it big, but I think a lot of people now use it. It's a review site for restaurants mostly. I think you can review everything now, doctors, stores, but it's mostly for restaurants, and it's probably the biggest one in the world. So people review restaurants they went to. And because it's so big, people now check it before they go to a restaurant. So your Yelp score is really important.
So, and for Gen Y, what do you think? Do they prefer Yelp or TripAdvisor or third platform, or what is the most popular?
On the country.
Okay.
I think in most parts of the world, Yelp is the biggest. But TripAdvisor is also pretty big, especially for hotels.
Some just check it on Google. Yeah, they also have a lot of comments already. And okay, but let's talk about. You mentioned authenticity is a buzzword. Yeah, I think for the hospitality industry, sustainability more and more becomes the next buzzword. Yeah? And I more and more find out that most people can't make heads or tails of it when they have little knowledge about it. Yeah. So some companies do a lot of advertising. Yeah, we are so green. We deal with this and that SDG goal, sustainability development goals. And I think it's very difficult because the link between we are so sustainable and so on, and greenwashing is so obvious for me. How do you think about that, about greenwashing and sustainability in the hospitality industry?
Yeah, I think I agree with your point. Basically, authenticity might be a buzzword, but it's also really important, especially to young customers. If you're not perceived to be authentic, then you have a big problem, especially in the future. So if you are being perceived as someone that greenwashes rather than actually green, that's going to be a real problem for you, because people just feel it. They know you're not being real with them. And that can only take you so far.
And do you think that hygiene will be the next buzzword? Maybe. Of course, now hygiene is a huge topic. Do you think it came to stay? And do you think that restaurants, hotels that now invest in hygiene, in, I don't know, air treatment solutions, in sustainable hygienic food waste collection systems, do you think they will use it also for to advertise for their restaurant, hotel?
Yeah, I think that hygiene is going to be more relevant now, even after the pandemic, because I think it's going to stay with a lot of people. I think it has been quite a traumatic event for many. Investing in hygiene and also advertising with it will be helpful in some way. Yeah.
Let's move to one of your articles you wrote for the FCSI about how restaurants can prevent food waste.
Yeah.
There you quoted a study, I think from the UK, where they said, or they found out, that if restaurants, hotels, commercial kitchens invest £1 in measurement in something that can help to reduce food waste, they make a profit for approximately £7.
In a couple of years, I think. Yeah.
Do you think this is maybe a little bit exaggerated, or do you think this is possible?
I think it's probably, well, it's not exaggerated precisely, but it's probably an average, because some companies made a lot more money and most made less. But I think it is a profitable investment.
Yeah, but you worked in the hospitality industry. How's it possible that I can save money by factor 7? I've read similar articles between factor 3 and maybe factor 10. Yeah, so it's you have to buy less food, you have to cook less food, and you have to pay for less food waste disposal. So is there something missing, or?
No, I think that's the biggest point. I think most restaurants go bankrupt because they throw away too much food. Their inventory is too big and they lose too much of it.
Yeah.
So finding ways to reduce that is huge for the financial side of the restaurant.
In one of my last interviews, I interviewed Babak and Nina, two scientists, and since then I've still read a lot about all-you-can-eat restaurants, because this was the topic back then, to reduce food waste in all-you-can-eat restaurants. And I found out that there are already all-you-can-eat restaurants where you don't have to pay for the food to enter the restaurant, but also you have to pay for everything you waste, you leave on your plate. Your plate waste gets weighted, and then you have to pay, I don't know, X euros or dollars per 100 gram of waste.
Yeah.
Have you heard about that, or do you know about similar ways how to avoid food waste?
Well, I haven't heard about that specifically. I think it's clever maybe, but I think it's mostly a marketing technique more than anything else, because you could also just factor in the waste into the price to begin with, you know?
Yeah, and then, well,
it's obvious basically, but yeah, I think it got people talking about them probably, so that's clever.
And I don't know, I'm curious what you would think. What effect it would have. Yeah? Maybe there are the people on the one side that say, okay, yeah, I will eat everything I put on my plate because I don't want to pay for it twice. I have to pay the lump sum to get in the restaurant, and then I have to pay related to my food waste. Or others say, yeah, okay, they really want to be sustainable, to save, to do something good for the environment. So therefore, I should really eat everything and do not waste it. But on the other hand, there are people that say, no, I don't want. I want to stay slim. I don't know, and they don't care if they have leftovers on their plate.
Yeah.
What do you think? Gen Y people, are they more on this? On which one of the two sides are they?
I think you can't generalize fully, but I think mostly younger generations, Gen Y, Gen Z, are quite environmentally conscious. So I do think they want to reduce waste. So I'm not sure how aware they are how much waste restaurants do produce. Also, the tactic this particular restaurant used, I don't know. I mean, if you get a lot of plates back that aren't finished, instead of making the people pay for it, that's one solution. But I think that maybe you're doing something wrong as a restaurant if you get too many plates back unfinished. So that means either your food isn't good enough, or more likely you're serving too much of it. And I know there are then exceptions. No matter how much you serve, something will always come back by some people. But if you look at the average, usually your plate should be empty, otherwise you're serving too much.
Well, let's talk about a little bit what restaurants can do to prevent food waste in total. Yeah, Babak and Nina, they mentioned there are 3 types of food waste: the preparation waste, first in the kitchen, then maybe plate waste, what is coming back from the customers, and in the end of the day, the food surplus over possible overproduction.
Yeah.
You mentioned if you have too many plate wastes, you either put too much on the plate or you do something wrong. Your meals are not good. Yeah, you're not cooking good. Maybe you should change the chef. But what do you have also suggestions to reduce preparation waste and overproduction? So the two other categories.
Yeah, well, the preparation waste, there will always be some of it, but there are things you can do to tackle that. One is there are techniques to cut vegetables in a way that they can be stored longer.
How is that? You cut it and then you store it?
Yeah, well, you can do that. Yeah, a lot of restaurants take a lot of preparation, so you do have to cut the vegetables and then you can keep them for a while. And depending on how you cut them, you can keep them longer.
Okay.
I don't know the science behind that. I just know that it works. Yeah, a lot of Asian cuisines have been doing that for a long time, and a lot of Western cuisines have refused to learn it.
So they cut it and then put it in the fridge or in the freezer, or
it just stays fresh longer if you cut it a certain way rather than a different way. But there are also cutting techniques for meat and fish, which allow you to use more meat and fish, so you throw less of it away. And that's all things you can teach. There's also storage, different storage methods aside from the cutting, different types of materials, different temperatures, different containers that people aren't aware of, and a lot of it will allow you to keep stuff longer.
Yeah,
a lot of restaurants don't do it.
But you mentioned the cutting techniques. Yeah, in 2019 I was traveling a lot, and I don't know if it was a cruise ship or a casino where I saw a woman cutting. She was in the food prep for a huge, I don't know, restaurant, hotel, cruise ship. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But so she was just cutting fruit all day long. Huh? And she had a watermelon, and the first thing she did, she cut a cube out of it, threw away everything, and then cut the cube in small cubes. Yeah, and I was just looking on everything she wasted and thought this isn't possible. But of course, she is much quicker, and if she has to cut, I don't know, 5 tons of fruits a day with watermelons and whatever, that's just more economic. But I think it shows perfectly that the potential for the hospitality industry is enormous to save.
To become more sustainable.
Let's talk about the third category. So you mentioned techniques or possibilities to reduce preparation waste, plate waste. The third category, food surplus, overproduction. Do you have an idea how we could reduce that as well?
Well, there's simply the forecasting, which is something you have to get a feeling for. I guess you can also use software, but I don't know how viable it is for small restaurants. And I think most restaurants are small. That's something that people forget. So McDonald's can do software forecasting, but your average restaurant can't do it. But you can still learn it. You just have to get a feeling for it. And I think it's important. And the other thing is that there are even tips and tricks, basically. In many cases, the overproduction is only, or the waste, it balances basically. Often it's just a few of your meals. So just take them out of the menu and come up with something else. And often that brings down the overproduction and the waste by quite a lot. So both the preparation waste and the overproduction.
So
and also
to produce a scarcity on your menu.
Yeah, that's also a thing. People are afraid of running out of dishes, but I don't think they should be. Because if you run out of stuff, okay, it can sometimes hurt you, and it shouldn't be every dish every day by 1 p.m. But a certain scarcity is also can be helpful as a marketing technique, basically.
Yeah. Marius, you mentioned McDonald's. Your colleague, as I would call him now, at the FCSI, he wrote, and Michael Jones, he wrote an article, I think it was in December, also about sustainability, about food waste in the hospitality industry. And he mentioned the example of McDonald's. I think they have the goal to reach the goal for 2025 to become to just use 100% recyclable packaging, and to recycle more in their restaurants. And he also wrote that in 2018, McDonald's did just recycle waste in 10% of all their stores, of all their, which I thought is as well, unbelievable, huh?
Yeah.
Do you know about similar impressive examples like that, where you really see the huge potential, how we still have a huge potential to save food waste, prevent food waste?
I think McDonald's is always a good example for everything you can talk about, because they're so big and everything they do has a massive impact. And you mentioned the 10%. I think sometimes people are being overly harsh on McDonald's and so on, because they're very big companies, and like a air freight carrier, it takes a while to turn. But I think if they do it, then it has a huge impact. So I think they deserve support whenever they do something that is good. Yeah. And but also small restaurants, which together are also a huge part of the industry, should do more. They sometimes try to push it off onto the bigger ones.
Yeah, well, definitely not everything McDonald's does is bad. I know, for example, that they really now start to use innovative machines and systems to collect food waste.
Yeah.
They also are our customers already. But as you said, it's just an impressive example, because and you can see, of course, they are also operating in different countries worldwide. In some countries, for example, recycling is not at that level that we are doing it in Europe. I don't know if you are familiar with the example in Austria. I'm Austrian. In Austria, a lot of people know the example that in Vienna, our biggest city, almost, I think, 2 million inhabitants, they throw away as much bread as the people in Graz, second biggest city, are every day.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Which is insane. Yeah.
But I think in the UK, restaurants, they throw away more meals than the UK would need to cover all the required meals, basically, by people who don't have enough to eat, by far, several times over.
And for example, I think it started in Zurich, actually. At least it's a Swiss company called Ässbar, a chain, where they sell bread from partner companies, but 1 day old bread for half the price the original bakery.
Yes,
that's the bread. Do you know of similar examples in the Netherlands? Or
I do know that a lot of stores actually are doing that themselves here. So bakeries sell day old bread instead of throwing it away. So it happens a lot on a small scale, actually. On a big scale, there's always something, but I think it needs to become more structural across the whole economy. Because at the end of the day, all those examples, they are nice, but they are outliers.
Yeah, but of course, the best thing would be to prevent food waste. Like this company Ässbar, for example, does to sell 1 day old bread, which of course is still hygienic, healthy. It's just not so fresh anymore, but it's perfect. I think most people in different parts of the world would be very happy to have such high quality of food. So this is, of course, the best to prevent food waste in the first way. And the second possibility maybe is before we recycle it, before we put it in an AD plant, produce energy and fertilizer. I know that there are also more and more organizations that try to be able to feed food waste to animals again.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, the animal byproduct directive from the European Union almost 10 years ago now forbid to feed K3 waste with animal products to animals, and because of a lot of diseases, for a reason. But these organizations, they say, hey, in Japan, in South Korea, they know about the problems of E. coli, of salmonella. Therefore, they cook the waste, the food waste, and then feed it to the pigs as it's safe then.
Yeah.
Do you think this would be a good approach? Or you personally, if you eat, are you vegetarian or do you eat meat once in a while?
Occasionally, yeah, a few times a year.
Would you have a problem if you know that the pig, whatever you're eating, has eaten your food waste before? Or do you think this is the perfect cycle, maybe?
I think, well, a lot of the pigs humans eat didn't have a very great life, and you don't want to know what they had to eat. So I think the food waste would often have been a better option if you really think about it. So I'm not too concerned about that. And I mean, it used to be the case here too. I remember when I grew up in a hotel in Switzerland, we still had a big blue barrel where we put in food waste, and the farmer would pick it up. And he was a pig farmer. Yeah. So I think it used to be like that, so it can be again. And especially in Japan and South Korea, if they figured out a way to do it safely, I think Europe shouldn't be so hesitant to learn. But as we can see now during the pandemic, Europe is very much hesitant to learn from Asia. So yeah.
Yeah. Let's move a little bit from food waste specifically to climate change in general. You also wrote an article about that, climate change in hospitality, the influence of the hospitality.
Yeah.
And what I liked most was where you quoted, I think it was not the EPD, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency,
yeah.
US Environmental Agency, Protection Agency, which said that, hey, restaurants, you should I don't know, try to get some trees in front of your restaurant, because then you can lower or you save 4 degrees, so you can put down the AC a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you learn such tips on university as well, or in the MBA?
I think in a lot of business schools still, sustainability is also very much a topic, because like you said, it's a buzzword, but it's not really addressed in detail. So a lot of it is articles about the sustainability development goals, or whatever they are called. I've had to read them a lot in my school career, but yeah, there's no real detail like that. So I found that out myself, not in school. I think business schools need to do a lot more in terms of teaching about sustainability.
To write about it, to read about it, and to speak about it is one thing, but the most important thing is to do it. Yeah. So companies should really maybe do or act sustainable first, and then they can talk about it. Most companies talk about it, and if you really check it, you see that that's mostly greenwashing, or at least what I criticize. Before we try to do some predictions, maybe look into the future, because we've also written some articles about that. I would like to talk about one article. Actually, you wrote, I think, 3 about them, tipping with racism, sexual abuse. I think you quoted, I have to check who it was, but I just have to read it out that we don't mix it up. But you wrote, the average hourly tip for white, Latino, Black, and Asian waiters in the US is $7, $6, $5.60, and $4.80 US.
Yeah.
How is that, and what can you suggest for us? Should we always, when we go in a restaurant, do the tipping in the end? Should we always try to keep that in mind, that we try to, of course, tip everyone the same? Or do you have other tips, or would you suggest to don't have tipping at all and just pay more for the meal, and then the restaurant owner should pay everyone equally? Or what would you suggest?
Oh, well, for that statistic in particular, I think we have to look at it two ways. There are two reasons for that, basically. One is that within the same type of restaurants, people of colors are being tipped less than white waiters, and that must come down to racism, either knowing or unknowing, among the customers. So that's one part. But another part is that the restaurants where the people of colors are waiters are often located in lower income neighborhoods. So their customer base is also less likely to be able to tip more. So the difference in tips comes down to two different factors. It's not entirely one or the other. And I think that shows a problem in the industry, because in a lot of countries, the wages of these people, or the income, is not dependent on the wages so much as the tipping. But that leads to inequality because of the two factors I just mentioned. So what can be done about that? I think restaurants have tried to eliminate tipping, like I wrote about in the article, even high-profile restaurants. And the problem is that that wasn't really popular among customers and even staff, because the customers missed the agency, basically, of being able to tip, and the staff missed the instant gratification. So as long as there are many competitors out there which don't follow the same path, it's very difficult to implement it. And a lot of restaurants had to move away from that. So I think I do support the idea of getting rid of tipping, but it can only happen if it comes from the top down. It has to be legislative. And that doesn't have to be a ban on tipping, but what's very important is that there's a higher minimum wage for the hospitality industry, because only then you can tackle that income inequality, because people aren't dependent on the tips, but rather their wages. And yeah, to answer your question, I do think people should keep stuff like that in mind when they go to restaurants.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, at the moment, in most countries,
yeah,
all the restaurants are shut down anyway, so it's just takeaway, and mostly there's then no tipping. Of course, now when I go to restaurants, pick up something, I tip as well, because I know that how difficult it is for them at the moment to survive as a restaurant. No many restaurant owners, and yeah, we can just hope that we get out of this pandemic as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And well, talking about the pandemic, I think last week or a couple of days ago, the FCSI published your latest article where you wrote about how the pandemic can influence, or can be influenced, or can influence the labor shortages we have in the hospitality industry. We had in the hospitality industry before, and you did a prediction what would happen after the pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Well, there are people that think that the labor shortage will be less severe because the industry will be smaller. And I think that might be true for a while, but I think the industry will bounce back quite fast, because after being inside for so long, there will be a demand for restaurants and entertainment and so on. So I think it will be faster than people think. Also because probably property prices will have gone down at least a little. So new restaurants will start fast. And I think, so not only will we get back to old levels of the staff shortage, I think it will be worse, because a lot of people that were in the industry have left it by now, either because they had to, because they didn't have job, or because they decided the industry is not as stable as we thought. Maybe we should transition to something more stable, like healthcare.
Totally agree.
So I think it will be worse than before.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there will be fewer newcomers because they saw how unstable the industry can be, and fewer people that are already in the industry because they transitioned to something else. Yeah.
Okay. And you also wrote an article about the trends in hospitality for 2021. So still the second year of the pandemic, as I would call it. You mainly mentioned 3 points: at home dining,
Yeah,
automation, and experimentation. Can you please go a little bit into detail about all 3 of them?
Yeah, well, at home dining, partly that's just the regular pickup and delivery. I think will stay. Even restaurants that didn't do it before the pandemic, I think they will have to continue to do so because people got used to it. And I think they should do so because it's an extra income stream, even if there might be another pandemic. Let's hope not, but I think it makes your business more stable. And the at-home dining experiences refers to basically that pickup and delivery doesn't have to be like it is usually. It doesn't have to be Domino's, so to say.
Yeah, and what is it usually? So eat out of a cardboard package,
Yeah, or plastic, yeah.
packaging. What do you think about packaging for takeaways? What trends do you see here? Do you think bioplastic packaging will be the way to go, or plastic or packaging that you can reuse, or what trends do you see here?
Yeah, I think, well, there are 2 things back to the at-home dining experience. I think that means that you can do things that are more special. For example, I mentioned a restaurant that delivers paella, and they deliver it in the paella pan in a pizza carton. So that at home, it feels like you're in the restaurant instead of eating the paella out of a
And then
plastic.
they pick up the pan.
Yeah, I think so. They pick it up. So that's an example. But the packaging itself, I think, will have to become more sustainable because customers will increasingly demand it. And I think legislation will increasingly demand it. I don't think, I hear a lot of people talk about reusable packaging. I'm not really a believer in that because restaurants really have a lot of liability when it comes to people getting sick and so on. So I think they'd rather have stuff that is being thrown away than they have to reuse. Maybe it's not quite as clean as they want it to be.
Do you think it's a hygienic issue again?
Yeah, it puts a lot of control into other people's hands that you want into your own hands as a restaurant. And I think that's not really a popular thing. So I don't believe in that as much as other people do.
Sorry. If it's reusable, you can just put it in a dishwasher, and then all pathogens, all the hygiene should not be a problem. Huh? Over 70 degrees.
Even if it's not your fault, if people get sick, they might blame you publicly because they figure, oh, I used the reusable packaging or something like that. And just the public reaction to that could be bad, even if you didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So even if it might just be paranoia, I think it would mostly be fine. But I still think restaurants worry about that because there's just a lot of uncontrollable factors, even if it's in theory safe. So I believe more in sustainable packaging that can be sustainably broken down rather than reusable packaging personally, because you do have to rely on the people bringing it back, and a lot of people won't bring it back.
Yeah. Well, I think there are ways to have a high rate of returns, but I agree with you. What do you think about the second example you mentioned, automation? Will we have robot waiters when we are allowed to go back to restaurants, or what can be automated in the hospitality industry? What do you think?
I actually wrote my thesis about the introduction of AI and robots in hotels mostly, but also restaurants. And I looked at what young customers, how they would theoretically react to automation in different parts. So in the restaurant, in the front desk, in wellness, and so on. Yeah. And my results were that they mostly think it's fine everywhere, except for where you are physically, where the robot or the software would have physical control over you. So wellness, it was very unpopular. Restaurants, they were fine with it, just as fine as the front desk, basically. So I think there's a big future for automation in restaurants. However, there's one factor. There is a line where the human interaction becomes more important than the speed or the hygiene. So if you eliminate too much, then people won't come. But if you add a little bit of it, they will come, and maybe even more than they usually would have, because your service is faster, because it might be cleaner, and so on. So I think in a restaurant, every aspect is open for automation, but the industry has to find out where the balance lies. And in terms of finances, I think it's expensive now, but the technology acceleration is so fast that it will become a reality quite soon, sooner than many people think, I think.
Yeah. But well, I think for, I don't know, business hotels, 3-star, 4-star hotels,
yeah,
people used to do the check-in 24/7, just with a computer, and then they get their key or get their code for the room. I think people got used to it here. And in the back of house, as I'm working for a company where we produce systems where you can collect food waste more or less automatically. You don't have to carry it down into the basement and so on. I think a lot is going on in that direction. I think also robots sorting or putting dishes or the plates into the dishwasher and getting it out and sorting it is the next thing we will see heavily. And yeah, automation, I totally agree with you, will of course also be increasing heavily in hospitality. Your third example was, or idea or thought of trend that you see, was the experimentation.
Yeah.
And well, please explain it on your own.
Well, it depends on the country, but in a lot of countries there isn't a lot of room, or before the pandemic there wasn't a lot of room for more restaurants, because the industry was quite successful in a way. So there were a lot of restaurants, and the pressure was very high, the rents are very high, so there wasn't a lot of room to, if you were able to open a restaurant, there wasn't a lot of room to experiment. You had to play it safe. And even then, it didn't work out in many situations. But I think the pandemic, because so many restaurants will go bankrupt, I think in many countries they talk about 50, 60% won't make it through, if not more. There will be a window where there is a lot of space, and a lot of space means prices will go down for that space. And I think that will allow some fresh new ideas to emerge in the restaurant industry, as there is a little more room to breathe when you open a restaurant, at least for a while. So there's more room to experiment, and a lot of experiments can turn out to be successful. So that means once the prices have gone up again, the industry will be a little more colorful than it might have been before the pandemic. Maybe. That's what I think, at least.
Yeah. Do you have an idea if you would have to, or if you would start a restaurant, maybe not now, but let's say in half a year, what would you do? Would it be vegan, vegetarian? Would it be, how would it look like? And
something that I personally believe is, I I'm not a vegetarian officially, but I am mostly, and the rest of my family is vegetarian. And I do believe that we need a lot more vegetarians or people eating mostly vegetarians in the world, simply because of the climate. But I don't think, personally, I sympathize with vegetarian restaurants, even vegan restaurants. But if I would open a restaurant now, my goal would be to not be 100% vegetarian, but rather have a little bit of meat and have that meat be of very high quality, to educate basically the consumer in how much meat should you eat, and also how better quality meat, what it tastes like, basically, that it's simply better for you. So I would like to see more better meat in restaurants. And that's also what I would do. Fewer meat, but better.
So you think the trend towards less meat will definitely continue?
Yeah.
Because in one of your articles you wrote, meat is responsible a loss of biodiversity, one of the biggest drivers of the deforestation, and the main source of water pollution. Simply put,
and world hunger.
Pardon?
And world hunger.
Yeah, and simply put, one of the main causes of man-made climate change. I think the fake meat is quite popular in the Netherlands. You're the front runners.
Yeah, we have a lot of companies.
Pardon?
We have a lot of small companies that make very good stuff, and they're being bought up by big companies like Unilever and McDonald's and so on. So it's really, somehow it has become a high-tech industry in the Netherlands.
What do you think? Which way will McDonald's choose? I definitely think that they won't become a fully meatless restaurant, but more and more burgers will be meatless. Or what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. The problem with something like McDonald's is that it's so big that it's very difficult for them to transition into anything, really. I once read an example that they wanted to make a burger with avocado on it. The product designers came up with that, and then they did the math, and they found out that there aren't enough avocados in the world to make that burger for McDonald's.
No.
Yeah. So that's the case with everything that come up, you know? So it will take a while for them to transition away from meat, a long time, but I think it is something they want to do, because the meat industry really is in many ways a very shady industry, especially if it's on a large scale. And I don't think they want the headache. So, but it will take a while. And I think part of that will be meat replacements, and part of that will be eventually the laboratory meat. But yeah, it's going to take a few more years, 2 decades, I think, depending on if there will be breakthroughs or not.
Okay. Let's move to the last article you wrote for the FCSI. I want to talk about I think the title was "What Restaurants Can Learn from the Pandemic." Mostly you wrote about two things: the delivery and pickups. We I think already talked about that. And second thing was extra comfort and maximize space.
Yeah.
When I read that, I thought, yeah, of course it's possible. Extra comfort is always something the customers would appreciate, but they would have to pay for it. Huh? Of course, if you have a restaurant in 2019 with 100 tables and you want to open it in 2021 with 50 tables, do you have to charge more? Do you think people are willing to pay for it after the pandemic?
I think partly it can be compensated by offering pickup and delivery, which many restaurants didn't do before. I think so partly they can compensate fewer seats with that. I think also, I even think a lot of restaurants might never be regular restaurants again, but they'll transition into becoming what they call ghost kitchens. So they only do delivery. You can't even pick it up anymore. They don't have a counter, basically. I already saw articles about that happening increasingly in California. Restaurants just shutting down and turning into ghost kitchens, because really it makes them more money than having an actual restaurant, because the rent the rent in so many places is so high that you can't compensate it even with customers. So you might as well only deliver. But even those restaurants that do stay regular restaurants, it will be a transition phase for customers to pay maybe more. But I think in a lot of places it is necessary, especially in, for example, Germany. A lot of restaurants are too cheap and it's not sustainable. The food can be sustainable, but it's also not economically sustainable. A lot of these people work too much and it's too precarious. So it has to change. And eventually customers will adapt.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Marius, last question. What are your plans for the future?
Yeah.
Most difficult question in
yeah. And also I think the last year has taught us not to plan too much.
No 5-year plans anymore?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, I want to grow 1520. I also want to make more content. Yeah, that's mostly it.
Yeah. I wish you all the best. I will keep reading your articles at the FCSI and on your homepage. All the best for you and 1520, you and your girlfriend.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for the very interesting talk.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.